So I'm here today at Lotus, which is where the love for classic cars really came to me after my dad used to work here back in the 80s for Team Lotus, and Nikon have invited me here to try out their new Z9, and I'm really excited to shoot them in a way that's never been shot before, and the new technology that's just here, that the speed, I'm so excited to try out today.
Hey Amy.
Hi.
How have you been?
I've been well. How have you been?
Really well, thank you. Really excited about today.
Yes.
And I have a feeling this is probably the first time you've seen the camera, right? So let's get right into it. Now, one of the things I'd really like to know first of all, just to make sure that you get the most out of the next couple of days using this camera, is just a little bit about the cameras that you've used previously. So you've got a D6.
My workhorse.
And we have a D850, right?
Yes, which has been with me for a number of years now, if you can't tell already.
I love the style of this, but I'm sure that's... Yes. Just talk to me about, why do you have a D6? Why do you have a D850? Do you just like shooting on two cameras? Oh,
I love shooting on two cameras because also I am a prime lens shooter. So to be able to have two cameras with two primes is the way that I work. And I mean, for me, they are such rugged machines, both of them. And both of them are really ready to go into any terrain, weather, whatever job I've got for them, they are ready to help me out. So yeah, that's why I currently have these two beautiful machines, really.
And you've had your D850 longer than you've gone like D6, right?
I have, yes. Before the D6, I did have the D5. Then as soon as the D6 came out, I thought I've got to get my hands on that, and then upgraded. But the D850, I mean, I started really with my full frames when it was the D600. So I naturally went D600, D750 to the D850 for me. So that's been with me now for a number of years. I can point to every single little mark on this and tell you what job I was on during, what adventure I was on when I got that mark.
And that's a great aspect of these cameras. They all have a story, right?
Oh, absolutely, because you work with these things all the time, and in my case, they are put through some difficult situations, and to be able to know that I can still rely on them and they can actually handle that, to be able to have my faith in my cameras is something that's a must.
Okay, so one of the things that really helped me to try and explain this camera to you a little bit better today is just to get a good idea about how you really use these. So how would you just normally focus a normal everyday job, or how does that work?
So when it comes to the autofocus of both of these, I tend to use it in quite an old school way.
Sure.
So I have a single point of focus, which I then focus on my subject and then recompose. I don't know if that's the right way of doing it, but it's the way I kind of like. I mean, all of my inspirations have been either conflict photographers, photojournalists, when people would shoot on film, and I think to myself, okay, if they can do that, then I should be able to use these machines just like that. But I can't deny, it has made my job a little bit difficult. Maybe I should try and switch up the way that I focus. As technology moves, we also change the way that we shoot.
100%.
I know I've changed from something else. I would move my focus point to then go to the single focus. So I imagine that this won't be the end of my the way that I focus.
Well, and I kind of have a suspicion that it also won't be the end of the way you focus, because I feel like this is going to change that completely. So
I'm excited to hear.
I definitely think that there's a lot of really cool stuff in here that might help you. That might help you in those difficult situations where you need it to focus on something in particular, or at least follow something. One of the things that it will look for is it can look for people, and it can also look for vehicles, which is going to be quite important to you.
So what, like just cars? Or?
So it can do cars, bikes, motorcycles. It knows the difference between a bicycle and a motorcycle.
Oh, cool.
And it will also know the difference between eyes, faces, and upper torsos as well. So it should be really interesting to see you shoot with this camera, and then seeing the camera just pick up these subjects as they're in front of you, right? So.
Oh, that sounds really, really cool. I'm excited to try that.
Definitely. Ergonomics, button layouts, what do you love about shooting like D850 and D6?
Yeah, especially when I'm using them at the same time. I don't have to think about the change of where everything is and how things work, and it's much easier for me to do my job well when I know where all the buttons are.
Yes, and I suppose that also helps in low light situations.
Oh, absolutely. So, I mean, I only shoot with natural light, and when it gets to nighttime, that's such an important thing.
Sure, okay. So I think one of the really cool things is that, especially if we take a look at like the top of a Z9, we're in a situation where ISO, exposure compensation, shutter button, and also dials on the top plate and top plate screen are all in the same place.
Yeah, that already feels like I will be able to pick that up and just be able to understand where everything is, and the transition is not going to be a big scary job.
No, everything should be where you expect it to be, coming from a D6, coming from a D850.
Yes.
And in low light situations, the buttons light up. So just like your D6, just like your D850, all of the buttons on a Z9 will also light up as well.
Brilliant, that definitely helps.
Ergonomics are really important to a photographer. I would hope that you would feel like this feels like you're at home.
Already it feels so natural, like it feels different. You know that you've got something different in your hands, but I feel, as you said, just completely at home. Like just being able to automatically, my finger goes to where it's meant to, for everything.
Works.
It all works. And my ISO is where I want it to be. But no, this already feels amazing, and so easy to grip at different angles as well. Because when I'm shooting cars, often, especially car-to-car tracking, I don't know what I'm shooting. I'm shooting blind. I stick my hand out with my camera and hope for the best. So that's awesome.
With the two bodies that you have, your D6 has a fixed screen and your D850 has a flip out screen.
Yes.
So Z9 has a flip screen. You have that full body grip and then you have that flip screen attached to it as well.
The change from the D6 to the Z9, having the ability to flip that screen out and be able to, you know, for example, I shoot down a lot, so to be able to see that image without having to guess 100 times before getting it right, or even when I put my hand out from a car to be able to see what I'm shooting, that will at least limit the time it takes me to get the shot I want.
So one really cool thing as well is if you slide the screen up to the side, you'll see that it also flips out in portrait orientation.
Look at that. Especially, you know, with the use of social media, the ability to be able to shoot in a portrait way and be able to see what I'm shooting is so helpful.
I can imagine.
This is a game changer.
Yeah. So let's have a talk about speed. How often are you shooting at maximum frames per second?
I'm more of a single shot person, but when it does come to the panning, tracking of cars, that is when I need to have some pretty quick frame rate, because you never know how bumpy the road that you are on is, and yet being able to have the choice of shots is definitely helpful.
Sure, absolutely. So the Z9 gives you a viewfinder that doesn't have any blackout.
Yes.
So you can still shoot up to 20 frames per second.
Oh wow.
And you don't have a blackout between that. You don't even have like a mirror moving, obviously, as a mirrorless camera. I think the key things for you are 20 frames per second, whilst being able to autofocus, and all whilst being able to shoot through the viewfinder with no blackout, or just shoot on the rear screen.
It sounds amazing. I'm excited to see how this technology that I'm currently holding in my hand will be able to help me photograph some of these classic cars that I think we should hopefully have to shoot today, because the ability to be able to shoot not just a number of frames per second, but the speed from the point where I switch my camera on to bringing that camera to my eye to be able to take the shot, that's really important to me as well, because I'm constantly, especially on an event, I'm constantly looking for moments all the time, and it's to be able to have a camera that can react just as quick as me is really important to me. The thing about classic cars is that they do have a soul.
Yes, I agree.
It's my job to try and make sure that people who may not be into cars can understand that, and I think being able to have something like the Z9 to be able to help me kind of bridge that difficulty is going to be exciting. I'm really excited to try this out.
The key thing for me is that we're taking aspects that you really like about the D6, we're taking some aspects that you really like about the D850, and it's almost like we're combining them into one camera.
Awesome.
And I feel like over the next couple of days we can really put that to the test to make sure that you're really happy with it.
I'm excited. I'm really, I can't wait to have a go shooting some cars.
So I suppose we go start shooting, right?
Yes, please.
Let's go. It'd be great to just talk through your camera settings, make sure that your camera's set up correctly, and look at some of the picture quality settings, and also look at some of the different autofocusing settings that we talked about earlier as well, right?
For sure, yeah.
So the first thing I want to ask you is, what autofocusing mode are you most keen to start shooting with?
I think I want to start with a human element involved. So if I can get somebody to walk towards the car, hop in, hop out, that'd be really helpful. But I'd like to get them focused on the model and also on the car. Is that something that I can flip between?
So I think it's worth trying it either in 3D tracking, or there's an auto area. So the difference is 3D tracking is you have a particular point.
Yeah.
Auto area, I think, is the way that you might want to go, because it can then easily hop between the two without you having a designated point. So let's try 3D tracking, auto area, and I'll show you where we can change those and switch between them.
Okay.
So we can either change this in our camera's menu, or we have a button on the left-hand side of our camera.
Oh, hey.
So if you push and hold that button, and then if you roll your front dial for me, on the back of the camera, you'll see that that will start to change
I see that at the top.
the area that you're using. So there'll be an option that says 3D, and you should see a little small white square in the middle.
Yep.
And then there'll be an option that says auto, or it's basically a square that's filled in between two brackets.
Yep.
And in that mode, there's no like point in the middle, if that makes sense. So that auto area is what we're going to try first. And the best thing is if we started to point our cameras at this car, currently your camera will just basically see this as a car and it'll start focusing on it. You literally have to do nothing else. And then as soon as someone walks into the frame, it will then allow you to jump to that person if they walk in the frame. Okay, so from the front of the car, if you bring your camera up, you're in auto area.
Yep.
Your camera should then just automatically detect the front of the car.
Yeah.
And then as your model walks into the frame, you'll be able to switch between the two. So to switch between the two, you just press either left or right on the little directional pad.
Okay.
Or you can use the little AF toggle as well if you wanted to. So
All right.
a couple of different ways you can do that. But as the subject walks in, you can then either keep focusing on the car or choose to switch to your subject as he gets in the car.
Yep.
And then as soon as you lose sight of him because of the glare on the windscreen, it'll go back to focusing on the car.
Awesome, cool.
Easy as that.
Let's give it a go.
Let's give it a try. All right, so what we just talked about there in auto area was you using what's called an auto subject detection.
Okay.
So what that basically means is, as we saw, it would focus on the car, but if it also noticed a person or if there was an animal in your way, it would also then allow you to focus or switch between those different subjects.
Okay. Will it do that automatically or can I choose?
So you can choose which one's more important to you.
Okay.
So either pressing that left and right and then choosing either the person or choosing the car.
Brilliant.
But I also appreciate that for the stuff that you shoot, there are going to be times where you just might not want to focus on any people. You might just want to make sure that you're focusing on just a car.
Yep.
So you have the ability to narrow down what the camera's looking for. Okay. So in our cameras, there's going to be a setting that's called AF subject detection.
Yep.
And you can then change that from auto to just vehicle or just people. You might have the exact opposite, right? There might be a vehicle in front of you and you don't want the camera to focus on just that vehicle.
Yep.
You want to focus on the people around it. So it gives you the flexibility of either being able to focus on lots of different subjects, cars, people at the same time, or gives you the flexibility of saying to the camera, I don't want you to look for people. I don't want you to look for vehicles, for example. So I think for especially the stuff that you shoot in and around the cars, you don't just shoot cars, you shoot the whole story behind them and the people behind them as well. I think that's going to give you a really flexible way of shooting, getting the camera to make sure it's focusing on exactly what you want it to focus on. So Amy, I think once we're done shooting here, we're obviously going to be heading towards the track. So I don't expect you to use this right now, but it'd be good to really talk about speed and just making sure your camera's set up for some of the action stuff that we're going to be shooting out on track.
Okay. I think being on track, probably 20 frames a second, just because there's a lot of times where on a slower shutter, I'm gonna miss that shot. So yeah, I think the more the merrier.
Sure, cool. So to make sure that we're in the right setting, we've got our shooting modes on this dial on the left-hand side.
Yep.
Now, this is a locking dial, so just press a little tab in and then rotate that dial round. You'll see that it says single, which is for single frame, and you'll see it will say then low, or an L for low, and a H for high, which is the 20 frames per second.
Cool.
If you want to go faster than 20 frames per second, you have to then go round to this final option where there's multiple squares together.
Oh yeah.
That now lets you choose 20 frames per second, 30 frames per second, or 120 frames per second if you wanted to. And this is stills as well, so you're still taking pictures. You just need to make sure you've got a big memory card.
Yes.
So,
and that's still RAW as well.
Okay, so when you're in 30 frames per second and 120 frames per second, that's not RAW.
Okay.
You're going to drop down to JPEG, but you will still get it at 30 frames per second, you'll still get good resolution. The 120 frames is JPEG at 11 megapixels.
Okay.
So the fastest with RAW is 20 frames per second.
That's pretty good.
It's not bad. No. Okay, so if we set ours to the H, or continuous high, as it's also known, and we know that then we're good to go for 20 frames per second when we head to the track later. The other thing about the viewfinder display is that you can also adjust the blackout, so how the camera shows you that it's shooting.
Okay.
So there's a couple of different options that you have. It doesn't always just have to be you have no idea if the camera's shooting. It can flash at you to tell you that it's actually firing. So I think it'd be good just to show you what those different options look like, and then you get a good understanding of which option is going to be best for you.
Okay.
So let's go shoot some stuff.
Yes, please.
Cool.
Let's go.
Let's go.
All right. So my first experience car-to-car tracking with the Z9, one of my favourite things so far is the screen pivoting, because I can take both my landscape shots and my portrait shots and see what I'm doing, which definitely helps. I started off with the 3D focus and then flicked it over just to try out different modes to see which one I preferred. And honestly, just looking through the shots, I'm so pleased with some of these shots. Like, oh, it's just, I can't wait to edit them. You don't really feel like you have to get used to it. You pick up this camera and it's almost like you know exactly what you're doing with it. You have to do everything with such touch when you're in a situation like that, that it makes it very easy when you've got a camera. You don't have to look at, you can just feel, and it makes sense. So I think I probably did about, I don't know, 20 minutes of car-to-car tracking then. I got nearly 2,000 shots. To be able to get that many shots in that short space of time is just, it'll give me a range to choose from. With Nikon, it's been such a wonderful partnership because I know that I can go to any situation, any terrain, any weather, and be able to get the images that I need to get. Speed is incredibly important to be able to capture fast-moving cars and guess a moment that's about to happen, so I'm ready with my camera to take that picture. One of the shots that I always seem to struggle with is when a car is coming directly towards me at high speed. I've been really impressed with how easily it's been to capture those images with the Z9 over the last couple of days. For the camera to know what a car is, what a human face is, and be able to follow that, that will change the way that I definitely focus for a start. It's not just about the speed of how many frames a second that the camera can take, but also how quick it can respond to me and how quickly I can change settings to be able to get the image that I know I'm going to want. So critical for my work. Feels like I've known this camera for a long time, but at the same time, being able to do things like have the car focusing. I've not had to worry when my arm is stretched out of the side of a car trying to guess the shot that I'm trying to capture. Shots that I thought in the past would be really difficult to capture, I think now I'm excited to give them a go, and having something that is practically my two cameras, the D6 and the D850 in one, is going to be something that's game-changing. You think you always have to compromise somewhere, so to suddenly have the ability to not have to is something I didn't quite expect from a camera anytime soon. When you're photographing more classic cars, you know you have a little bit more time to get that shot because, you know, they're old, they need to take their time. Flip that to photographing a hypercar like the Avaya, and suddenly you think, right, I need to be on this, and my camera needs to be on this. So you change certain settings, like for example, instead of shooting single shots, I wanted to make sure I had a number of frames coming through per second, just to be able to capture whatever that test driver was going to do with that car. And it's a good job that I did, because things happen unexpectedly quite a lot. And being able to use a camera like the Z9, even if I've not used it for very long, I've got to make sure that I can understand it quickly to be able to change all of those things before I manage to get the shot, such as if we have a car that's come on the test track for only a quick 5-minute test. That is something that we have not necessarily prepared for, didn't expect. So being able to use the Z9 very easily, because it has so many similarities to what I'm used to, yet it's so different in its outcome, that's something that, yeah, is definitely helps with producing the images that I need to get. I want the viewer to really feel like they were sat in that moment, and they also have this inclination of the sounds and the smells and everything else that I love in the automotive world. A lot of the lenses that I shoot with are primarily a 35mm or an 85mm. I tend to shoot around 1.4, 1.8 for a lot of my work, so trying to get focus is really important. So I'm constantly using the touch screens to be able to zoom in to make sure that I'm seeing what is crisp and in focus. And over the last couple of days, I've been trying out the new Z lenses, which I've not actually had that much experience with so far. And my word, looking at some of the images that I got, very low light, using the eye focusing abilities of the Z9, it was one of those moments where you zoom in, you think, wow. Z9 is going to basically become my extra pair of eyes, not something that necessarily just captures what I see, but also sees more, knowing that I've got that technology to help me get those moments that I probably would have missed. I think that's going to open up a lot more shots that I'm going to be really happy with in the future.
I don't even need to ask you the question really if you're excited or not, because I can kind of see that on your face already.
I don't want to give it back. Let's say that.
Yeah, that's always a good place to start, right? I mean, I think that's a success in itself, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, especially coming from the start of our 2 days, when I first met you and you had your D850 that is lovingly
patinaed.
Yes, and then obviously you had your D6 as well, and we had that first initial chat about some of the really cool things that this could do. Do you think that initial chat and the things that we were talking about has kind of come to fruition? Do you think that?
Oh yeah, for sure. Like when you're explaining to me about what this camera can do, until you physically experience it, shooting the things that you're used to experiencing, like being a professional car photographer, I've shot a lot of cars and I know how to do it. So to then take the information you're saying, okay, this camera can do this and this, until I'm physically doing it in a situation that I know very well, that's when you really see that level up of camera. So yeah, that's been a real interesting experience to have.
We could sit here for like 6 hours and I could go through everything, but I'm sure you've got other important things to be doing. So
get us coffee and we can go for it.
If there's things that you think of and you want to ask about them, then we always know where we are, right? We can always help you out, just customize your cameras. But I think that's one of the biggest things is that you've been shooting so long with D850. I remember when you were there at the D850 launch event, and over the time you must have changed some of the ways that you use your D850, and you've learned some of the new things that are in your D850, and I think you'd be able to do that kind of same thing all over again. It's like you experiencing new things, but the same old things that you're used to, but then still finding those new little settings that might be useful to you as you start using it more.
Exactly that. It's the same with any form of process. The more you do it, the more streamlined you figure out how to do things and easier ways to do it. So yeah, it's going to be the exact same with Z9, and already it's so easy to pick up these things. I'm
so excited to see some of the stuff that you've created. Just watching you fly around on the track, head sticking out of it, and a spree, it's been amazing.
Doing that around the Lotus track is quite a wicked opportunity.